Hi, nurses. Welcome to Shift Change, the podcast for nurse leaders who are ready to shift their thinking from just a nurse to claim their position as a powerful agent for change. I'm your host, Amy Deagle, founder and CEO of the International Network of Nurse Leaders. We believe in the power of nurses to change the world, so let's get started. Hi, nurses. Welcome to another episode of the Shift Change podcast. I'm Amy Deagle, your host. I am so excited to be bringing you part 2 of my interview with Sheena Howard. We got on the phone to start recording this interview and ended up talking for over an hour and a half. So we split it into 2 parts. Part 1 went live a couple weeks ago. If you haven't checked it out yet, hit pause and listen to part 1 because we literally just pick up right in the middle of the interview for part 2 right now. This episode is going to dive into how you apply love-led leadership, whether you're a formal or an informal leader. You can apply love-led leadership anywhere and everywhere. And actually, it's part of Sheena's mission that this is how you show up authentically in every aspect of your life. So you're not showing up as one person in your workplace and then taking off a mask and showing up as another person at home. So really being a love-led leader is about showing up authentically in your life, no matter what situation you're in. So I'm really excited to bring you part 2 of this episode. And so without further ado, we're going to get to it. So if somebody's listening to this and they're saying, yeah, that's me, and also, really loving and resonating with it, how can they incorporate that not only into their professional life and their career, but also personal lives? Because that transcends everything, really.
Yeah. And I think that's what leadership is. Leadership transcends the personal and the professional. It's basically, you can't be one way when you go to work and come home and be completely different. In order for you to embody leadership or a leadership lens, it has to come from, it permeates your entire life. So I just want to be really clear with folks, because some of the criticisms of the lens of the theory is that people can see it as though this is some sexual thing. Mm-hmm. And it's not about that at all. A love-led leader would not overstep sexual boundaries, physical boundaries, anything like that. This is about helping people maintain actions that help people maintain their dignity and promote affection between people. And that affection is the healthy, joyful, engaged affection. So I just want to say that. So we can do that both in our personal lives and our professional lives. And so for me, I sort of worked it through a 4-step process. So that, you say it to yourself, I am a love-led leader, and see if it fits. If it resonates with you, maybe, you're like me, you have a wholehearted, yes, this is me. Or maybe you're thinking to yourself, maybe there's aspects of me that does this. And if that's the case, then move on to step 2, which is love-led leadership characteristic spotting. So spend 6 days looking for all the characteristics and see if you see them, and write about it, post about it on social media. Today, this is where I saw vulnerability in action, or authenticity, or accountability in my workplace, or I saw somebody expressing empathy. And think about that and look for it everywhere in your life. And then also for those 6 days, look at where you don't see it. Is there a place where maybe empathy would have really worked, or authenticity in a leader would have really worked? And then write it down, wherever that is, wherever, if it's in your journal, if it's maybe on whatever social media posts that you're on, or blog about it. And then on the 7th day, sit down and read all the things you wrote. And if you see yourself in any of those things, if you see where there's aspects of you that express all of those characteristics, or even just a few, or that there's places where you could make a difference with those characteristics, like where you didn't see vulnerability practiced, then you can move on to step 3. And that's just basically putting into practice. Pick one characteristic that you focus on for about 14 days. And look at how you manifest it, and then challenge yourself a little bit. So that could just even be in your own home. Like I think about, for example, this morning, my son is really upset about the warts on his hand. And I was getting ready to do this interview, and the empathy piece for me just wasn't there in the moment. right?
Mm-hmm.
And on reflection, I can see how I could probably use empathy in that moment at another time, because the beauty of it is you're always going to have another chance. So so you would do that step, you look at how that characteristic worked for you, where might you need to do more of it, and how you might do more of it. And if you want to bounce those ideas off a colleague that you've have identified as a love-led leader, or if you want to just do it privately, then you can do that. And then the fourth step, and you don't have to do this out loud, but it's to take a risk and say it out loud. Say it to yourself in the mirror, and then spread it if that's how you feel. Talk about love-led leadership. Talk about it in your family, with your friends, with your colleagues, with the leaders in your organization, those who are in formal leadership. And then look at running every decision, every mistake, every opportunity through through the lens of love-led leadership and the characteristics. So essentially, I don't think people can be leaders without examining what kind of leadership lens they have. And I think so often I don't think nurses really focus on what kind of a leader am I? Mm-hmm. And when I had the chance to do that, it improved. My career exploded exponentially. My personal life got so much better. The decisions I made got more authentic to me. The moral distress I felt in nursing decreased because I was able to speak to it much more clearly. Mm-hmm. So yeah, those are sort of the things that how I would imagine folks could kind of operationalize it or engage with love-led leadership in their personal and professional lives.
I just love the entire concept and resonate with it so much. And, if you're part of our membership community with the International Network of Nurse Leaders, we're going to post the traits that she talked about, and as well as the, what you can do to declare, are you a love-led leader? And that'll be the first place people can post and say it out loud, is within the community group. So if you're not part of the group, you can go to nurseleaders.ca/membership to find out more. But I just wanted to say, Sheena, when I started my first official kind of management role, it was this, I was modeling behaviors that had been modeled to me in managers, and they were very closed off and very authoritative driven and very removed from really wanting to seem like a person. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I modeled at first. And I was very closed off, and I was very scared to show who I was, especially because, I was managing people that were 20 years older than me as well. And I felt this, imposter syndrome. And then I had a experience in my personal life where my sister-in-law went into labor and had a baby at 26 weeks. And that kind of cracked me open. And I mean, my niece is fine. She's beautiful. She's 3. God. Everything worked out perfectly. But people saw me as a human because of how I shared that experience with them. And it cracked kind of that barrier open, and everything changed from that point on. And it was then relating to people as people and not having to have this barrier in place that you're the manager and you can't just be human. And so I love this thing of love-led leadership, because I really see that in my own journey, not even knowing what was happening really, and that it's okay to be vulnerable and authentic with people and let them know where you're at. You don't have to have all the answers, and people actually respect that more, and you're more relatable when you're, showing your human side and leading with love.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't get me wrong, love-led leadership is a hard skill. It's not a soft skill. I think we sort of focus on the soft side of nursing, which is, the relational stuff. But from my perspective, that's really hard work. To be able to be cracked open like that and be able to stay there is really, really hard. You can't ever, this is the thing from my perspective about love-led leadership, is you can't ever really master it, because every person is different. Every situation is different. And then you put that person in a situation and then they're going to respond differently. So love-led leadership allows you the flexibility to be able to meet people where they're at and allow us to also be where we're at as well, which is authentic. And we ask people in leadership, when we're in a leadership role, we ask people to be vulnerable and authentic with us. But yet, I think like you experienced, we don't want to do that. We don't want it because we want to be seen as the strong leader. And so then we miss huge opportunities, because if we're going to ask people, and our patients as well, if we're going to ask them to be vulnerable and authentic with us, and we're not modeling it to them, we're not showing them that we're an authentic person, or that we have passion, or that we can be accountable to them. And so that's why I say it's a really hard skill, is that it just allows us to show up in a really different way than we traditionally expect. And it gets back to the root of why we got into healthcare in the first place. And I think that love-led leaders ask more questions and they stay curious longer. And they take the time to establish relationships with folks, and also, like you said, share their struggles. And the thing that I've come to is that it's helped me be very clear about accountability. And I love Brene Brown. She says, clear is kind. So that I'm very clear about the importance of using evidence to support nursing, that when we increase our joy at work and decrease our burnout, patients are safer and we have a better work experience. And so everything in terms of accountability and holding people accountable to those things is really important, an important part, which I think, so you can hold people accountable and still lead with love, which I think is difficult, but when you look at the data bears out the relational leadership styles, of which love-led leadership is a part.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned Brene Brown. I was just going to actually say, when you experiment with this type of leadership and really that vulnerability piece, Brene Brown talks about vulnerability hangovers and how to deal with that. When that's not your normal way of operating, it can be really uncomfortable. And so, she's a great resource on that vulnerability hangover piece for those people that are interested.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. She features prominently in some of my research, her ideas and things. And also, when you understand how systems work, using love-led leadership becomes a fairly easy thing to do, especially if that's what resonates with you as a leadership. As a person in leadership, that you can see systems in a really different way and how things connect as opposed to siloed, which is when we engage from leadership, at least in my experience, when I engaged in leadership from a different lens, I saw things more as silos rather than as a connected, complex web. So that helps as well.
So this is a big question, and we've maybe answered it a little bit. But what movement would you like to incite with love-led leadership? How would leaders show up differently? What change in healthcare would be made if more people stepped up into this type of leadership model?
Right. So the movement essentially is I'd like to inspire folks to be able to embrace love-led leadership, to inspire positive change globally in their healthcare systems. So saying, I am a love-led leader, taking that risk and saying it, and then operationalizing it to make a difference in wherever you work, in whatever organization you work across the globe, whether that be in the World Health Organization or the UN or in a doctor's office or in labor and delivery or in a rural care center, and that can inspire positive change. And for me, if more people stepped into this, so from the bedside to the boardroom, I think what we would experience is a significant decrease in burnout. And when you look at the evidence and the data around burnout, it has significant impacts to patient safety and a significant impact to our lives. And when it has that kind of, it's just the ripple effects of those are huge. And for me, when I stepped into being a love-led leader, my burnout wasn't an option for me anymore because I was focusing my energies on running everything I do through that. And then I felt maybe some of the decisions I had to make weren't my favorite decisions, but I knew that I had done it in a way that felt like I had done it with a lot of moral courage. So I think that we would experience an increase in patient experience. Patients would be more, at least the research that I did bared that out, that when they felt love-led leadership from a provider or from a system, they felt better and they could engage more in their healthcare. They told people what was going on. So then we had more information to make better decisions. So I think patient safety would go up. And also we would be more flexible and responsive to changes and innovation. Love-led leadership has the potential to create a culture where we can make mistakes and an innovation culture. because we're looking at promoting people's dignity, maintaining their dignity, and helping promote affection between people. And when that happens, you can look at somebody and say, you had the best intentions here. Let's break this down and see what happened. Maybe some of these things are really great. Maybe some of these things we have to work on, so that you can make a mistake and people aren't going to come down on you for it. Because the more challenges the times when we're able to challenge ourselves and innovate in nursing, the better it is for us and the better it is for our patients. So for me, I think that if more people stepped into love-led leadership, we would see that kind of innovation and culture change. And then it would increase our joy at work and our work experience. And I just keep thinking to myself, imagine what could happen if we engaged in this in nursing, and if physicians engaged in it, if the system engaged in it, what could happen for all of us? And then what could happen if we use love-led leadership in our prisons or our schools or in private corporations? I think it has far-reaching effects and I kind of come to that, your vision, which is, I think it's your vision of nurses have the power to change the world. This is sort of where I feel like love-led leadership has the potential.
I love that.
Ugh, yeah.
Gives me goosebumps. Well, we'll kind of come back to a little bit of love-led leadership here in a couple of questions, but I just want to get your take on somebody, a nurse who's interested in formal leadership positions. So let's say like a management role. What advice do you have for shifting from that point of care role into a leadership management role for nurses?
Right. So discovering what your leadership lens is really important, because that way you're grounded and you do that by engaging in like a formal practiced self-reflection. So there's all kinds of things that you can look up on the internet. You can look up self-reflection for leads in a caring environment that was originally developed through some of the professors at Royal Roads. It has a wealth of questions that you can ask yourself in terms of what kind of leader am I? How do I show up in a management role? What are my passions? What are my values? So, and then that can really help you ground your leadership in the lens that you see it. An authentic self, in your authentic leadership lens. And then also looking for mentorship in places like this, in perhaps maybe it doesn't even have to be in nursing, just somebody who is a leader in some area that you really respect their leadership style, and then ask them all kinds of questions. Take that risk. And also, if you're interested in a formal leadership position, to just try it. In Ontario here, nurses make up 48% of the workforce, but we hold significantly less leadership positions across the board. And so we seek out opportunities, whether they be volunteer or formal, to just engage with your professional association, because they're always looking for folks that have on the ground lived experience, and then you can learn really quickly about how to affect policy, how to talk to government, how to talk to media, and then all of those skills you're learning will help you when you're looking and applying for formal leadership roles. So don't ever think that nurses can't. From my perspective, I'd like to say that I hope that nurses wouldn't ever think that they couldn't step into those formal leadership roles and take a risk in just trying it. And if it's not a fit for you, this is where I think love-led leadership can come in handy, that you can be empathetic towards yourself. So maybe your leadership is best done at the bedside. And that is just as important and just as valid and just as relevant as in the halls or in the boardrooms of our organizations.
And that's, I love that messaging. And that's really, we believe every nurse can be a leader. And so even if you're not in those formal leadership management positions, doing some of this work around your leadership style and really understanding who you are and how you show up is beneficial no matter what stage of your career. And in fact, I would challenge people to start looking into, learning about leadership and the different styles and which ones resonate, and, diving into more of the love-led leadership philosophy with you. I'm sure they can connect with you on Twitter, that sort of thing. And we'll make sure that all your contact information is linked in the show notes as well. to take a quick pause here because I wanted to mention that the International Network of Nurse Leaders membership community is now open. We are accepting members from around the world, nurses who are looking to get inspiration, encouragement, and really get momentum with getting their ideas out into the world, or nurses that love to be champions of these ideas and just want to be connected around their nursing peers who are working to change the world. So if you're interested in having that kind of community, head on over to nurseleaders.ca/membership.
The other piece that came to me, which I was thinking, is that it's important to understand systems. And as having a systems lens as a leader, no matter whether you're leading at the bedside or in a boardroom, is really important. So doing some research about what systems theory is. So, for example, Margaret Wheatley is a great one to read about systems change. Barry Oshry was probably hands down the one that helped me the most in terms of understanding systems theory and the organizations from top, middle, and bottom, and then how all of those levels can communicate with each other in order to affect change. I think that's really important as well.
I love that you mentioned that, and that segues perfectly into my next question. Go-to resources that help support you on your leadership journey. So, diving into systems theory and those two people you just mentioned, are there any other ones that are kind of your go-to? We've mentioned Brene Brown. Any other ones, podcasts, conferences, courses that people should be checking out?
Sure. So Leads in a Caring Environment, LEADS. There's a beautiful book, and there's courses all across the country that will help you on your leadership journey, and that I found really invaluable for me when I was learning and diving deep into leadership. Also, one of the things that nurses are taught about really early on is the stages of change. Pre-contemplation, contemplation, as it relates to smoking, generally. But you can apply that to whatever organization you're working in. You can do a really quick assessment about whether is your manager at pre-contemplation, and then you can target your interventions or your discussions around moving them from pre-contemplation to contemplation. So for me, that was a very big deal when I thought, okay, this is one of the ways I can start straight away in my messaging and in the ways in which I was sharing certain information. And also, Betty Sue Flowers wrote a book with two other people whose names are escaping me, but they wrote a book called Presencing, where they talk about the theory U, or the U theory. And that's really helpful to know that change, when it comes to healthcare, change is a really big deal. And it happens all the time. It's constantly happening. But that things start off at the top of the U, and then they die off, and then they cycle back again. And they come up to the top of the U. And when things die off, and I felt like this after I was terminated without cause, that things die off, but then when you come up to the top of the U again, you're in a much more ready state to be able to handle challenges. And that is one of the things that has been really helpful for me on my leadership journey, is just understanding that. It's kind of geeky. I'm a bit of a leadership geek when it comes to that stuff, but those are some of the books. And in terms of podcasts, this showcasing nurse leaders and listening to that is really listening to their experiences, whether they are different from yours or similar to yours, is really helpful. And then going to things like the RNAO has a Nurse Executive Leadership Academy, things like that, where you can network, and going to just conferences in general are a great way to engage.
Great, thank you. So you mentioned mentorship as being really important, within your career. How important do you think it is to have that support network of like-minded people to champion you through your nurse leadership journey? And when I say like-minded, I don't necessarily mean they agree, with all of your thoughts, but they're like-minded in the fact that they are looking to move the nursing profession forward. They're looking for advancement, for betterment, for finding solutions, and they're really about making a positive impact. So that's what I mean by like-minded, not that they all agree with every thought that ever comes out of your head.
Thank gosh they don't. A diverse team makes us safer practitioners, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. So for me, it's been really important to have a support network of nurses that lead in very similar ways. And it validates especially as I've been trying to in sharing love-led leadership with other people. You can, what I did discover in my research says that it's isolation is a really big deal in healthcare when it comes to talking about love-led leadership. And so I have more colleagues now that are willing to do that, and that feels really great for me, and also willing to expand the lens farther. Like, well, what about this, and what about in this context, and having those conversations, and also it's a gift when people share their struggles or they share what they've known, what they've learned. That's a real gift, and it also allows you to practice gratitude, which then is just basically a gift that keeps on giving in those environments, those communities of practice. And in primary care, it's really important to have that group of nurses because so often our voices, when we've talked about this before, aren't seen or heard or welcomed even, and have been systematically ignored for a long period of time. So then you start to feel like, is there something wrong with me? And so to have that group is really, it can help move you to places of action. And I have a group, I have an online group. And what I mean by that is just folks that I've connected with from school, and they may not even be nurses, but they engage in leadership and understand the same language that I do. And then I also have nurses and doctors who are engaging in care provision and leadership that seems similar to mine on Twitter, on Facebook, and then in my personal life as well.
Great. So we've talked, Sheena, a lot today about different challenges facing nurses. Is there one that you want to address right now that you think is kind of the biggest challenge facing nurses today, and any ideas on how we might go about solving that challenge?
Sure. I think it's burnout. Yeah. I think if I'm being really honest, I think it's burnout because we work in a system where nurses have a ton of responsibility, but very little power to do anything about it. We're constantly faced with moral distress. We use our voices and we use our expertise, and in order for our colleagues to trust us. Whereas we don't have to do that so much with patients because patients trust us a lot anyways. But it puts us in a situation where we start to get worn down by the system and get worn down by the policies and the way that we're treated even. And then when that happens, maybe we're not putting our best foot forward, and then we're being told that we're not doing things right. And so then that leads to a situation where we're feeling emotionally exhausted. We're depersonalizing things. We're not engaged, and we're really tired. And I think that nurse burnout is probably our biggest challenge. And so how do we change that? Well, we use a leadership style that crosses over the personal and the professional. So we lead ourselves, we take care of ourselves, and we find our people. We find the people that we can talk to and be with, and we start advocating for more joy at work, more engagement at work, more power at tables where perhaps maybe we haven't been invited before, asking why we're not there, asking specifically why, say, when I think about the realm of primary care and the redesign that's happening right now in the system, why aren't primary care nurses invited to the table? It's a very simple question. Or asking the media, like why we're not invited, like why we haven't been encouraged to comment on certain things. And so I think that all helps us with our burnout. That when we can face it directly and then engage in a way that leads our own self personally, but also can lead our organization and support. If we're in a positional leadership role, we can help prevent and eliminate burnout for nurses. Did that answer your question?
Yep. No, I love it. So as a leader in the nursing profession, what change do you hope to impact? And I think I already know the answer to this, but what would you like your legacy to be?
What would I like my legacy to be? Oh, I remember when I went into nursing first year, they asked us a similar question. What would you like to do in nursing? And what I said was, I got into nursing because I wanted to help people. And I got into nursing to change the face of nursing. At that point in the 90s, nurses were really hard for them to be nurses here in Ontario at that point. And let's face it, it's a woman-driven profession. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the root cause of, I think we're women working in a patriarchal, hierarchical model, and I wanted to elevate nurses to a place where they were seen as, or work to elevate nurses where they were seen as experts, that they were engaged in their work and treated equitably and fairly with equitable compensation. So I still would like that to be my legacy. I'd still like to change the face of nursing, and do that, and now in a more refined way, through love-led leadership. That's what I'm hoping my legacy will be.
I love that. And that's very similar to why I created the International Network of Nurse Leaders. So I'm so grateful that you've come into my world and we can work at this cause together. So on that note, the vision statement of the International Network of Nurse Leaders is that we believe in the power of nurses to change the world. And you're a perfect example of that. So what do you think of this statement? And in your opinion, what are some issues and platforms that nurses can put their collective voice behind to make a difference?
Right. So, I agree with your vision statement 100%. Absolutely. And I think that nurses are also patients. They're also parents. They're also primary caregivers. And so not only do we have a lot of opportunity to change the world as nurses in our profession, but we also have such a unique body of knowledge, skills, and judgment that we can bring to those 3 Ps: parenting, patients, and primary caregivers. And we can affect change in those realms as well. And I think that's a really important piece, that we bring our nursing skills to those roles. And some of the platforms or issues that we can get behind here in Canada, I think clean water. Access, everybody having access. We live in Canada, and we should all have access to clean drinking water. And as someone who's worked in an Indigenous community where there was a constant threat of boil water advisory, it's just a real passion of mine that nobody should have to live like that. Safe injection sites, I think, are another one. Working with folks who are street involved, so the homelessness, vaccination, the importance of vaccines, and also not all nurses are comfortable with this, but also asking the media to focus on nurses as experts when there are issues that need to be addressed. So homelessness, clean water, safe injection sites, vaccinations. Nurses have such an opportunity and a wealth of knowledge, and asking the media to be able to come to us for our opinions and what our recommendations would be, I think are platforms that we can use. Also our nursing associations, so our global association, your provincial association, and our national associations are great ways to get involved as well.
I love that. Thank you. So I think we have one more question we just wanted to touch on, just because you kind of mentioned, that culture of a burnout, and that leads to, poor work environments, and really this culture of nurses eating their young. And maybe it was more prevalent, when you and I were both starting out in our nursing careers. I've heard that maybe the winds are changing a little bit, and that this maybe isn't as bad as it used to be. But any thoughts around that, what the root cause is, and what we can work to do as leaders, as managers, to making sure that we're improving the culture within the workplaces, and that if there is a change happening, that we don't slide back into the way things were?
Absolutely. Every time I hear that nurses eat their young, I always think, oh, munch, munch. It's such an unfortunate sexist saying. I really just feel like it's such an unfortunate thing. And I have one of the folks that used to care for my boys has now gone on to nursing school, and she sees that in fact is the case, because it's happening with some of her professors. So it's happening, like nurses eating their young, quote unquote, in the classroom and also in settings. So I think it's still there. But I think for me, the root cause of it comes down to believing that we work in a system that's about divide and conquer. and pie, right? Like, how much of your pie can I have? Okay. Like, how big is your slice? I want that slice. I want a bigger piece. I didn't get a big enough piece. I think it comes down to that dividing and conquering. So the more divisive people are, the easier it is to make them do what you want. I also feel as though it puts us in that whole, that women are catty and we're out to eat each other or make each other look bad, or that we don't want each other to succeed, which I don't believe is the case. I certainly never worked like that, and I doubt that you did or do. But I do feel like it's really caused by burnout. This area of nurses have high responsibility with not a lot of power. If we make a mistake, or if our students make a mistake, we get like just jumped on straight away. And so people don't want to be jumped on. So they'll do anything they can to be a bystander or be somebody that actively is trying to control somebody else. That's just easier to do than it is to stay in your integrity and remind yourself this is more of a systemic thing. Yes, this person may have made a mistake, but it doesn't have to reflect badly on me. So I can help them work through that. And we also haven't taught our nurses, I don't think, at least, how to examine their own leadership styles, but then also how to be a mentor or a coach or a preceptor. About what it means to support mistake making and learning from those mistakes as a way. So rather than jumping all over the students, asking them questions on how did you get to that? What do you think? Tell me more about that. Those are all ways that we can fix it at a bedside level, and then also at a boardroom level or a formal leadership position level. You can implement mentorship, leadership opportunities where nurses get a chance to be mentored, so they experience that. Because they often haven't been mentored themselves, so then how do they precept or engage with students, and then teach them how to be preceptors. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel.
Great. So just before we wrap up, what are some things that you see happening today that make you proud to be a nurse and proud of where our profession is heading?
Oh boy. Proud of where our profession is heading. Well, Nursing 2020 is really exciting, that nurses are becoming more media savvy and using their voices in that way. That makes me really excited and proud that our global organizations are getting more involved in issues to protect the well-being of humans across the world. That's exciting to me and makes me feel really proud. I'm proud of where our profession is heading in that way. And also through research, which I never thought I'd say. I never in a million years thought I'd say that I feel really proud of being able to engage in research, but then also that nurses who are working on the front lines doing research that can help move us to higher levels of evidence, that help to create evidence that we can use to better the patient experience and make us more safe. That makes me feel really proud. And that's what I think.
Awesome. So I wanted you to take some time and reflect on 3 takeaways or tangible things that nurses can implement to further them in their career.
3 takeaways or tangible things that nurses can do to them in their career. So it might sound totally off the wall, but do something that has nothing to do with nursing. First takeaway is do something that has nothing to do with nursing. Just for you, that's going to help you feel like you're contributing to yourself, or maybe to your creativity, or maybe to another person in a completely different way. That's just for you, because that helps you become more well-rounded. It helps give you other avenues for creativity. And then I also think expanding your territory a little bit. So whether that's learning a new skill, learning about what your leadership lens is, or whether it's going to a conference where you're networking with other people who are doing amazing things, do that and expand your territory a little bit so that you can add a little bit more and keep yourself interested and curious about your nursing, about your own practice. And then also, I would say taking risks, and whatever it is, step up for a patient, call yourself a love-led leader, challenge a colleague in a respectful way that maybe something's been bugging you, or something's bugging you about the system, or you think this process could work a lot better. Take a risk and step up into that. And then, I think 3A is then write about it. Journal it, write it down, talk about what you did with somebody so that you can process it, so that then you can roll all those 3 things together and be able to and repeat those things. So they'll roll all together, and then just repeat it and keep repeating them, because that will further your career, and it has the potential to take you in places that you never expected.
Yeah. I love that. And that take risks piece, I'm actually reading a chapter for a collaborative book that's really about how that 20 seconds of courage can change your life. And that was part of it was a movie, We Bought a Zoo, where he talks about that. But really, if you look back over your career, it's those little moments where you put your hand up, or you say yes, or you apply for that job, or you speak up. Those things that are classified as taking risks are what's going to propel your career and your life forward. And so I think I love that one so much.
Yes. And it's also that it's never as bad as you think. Taking that risk on the opposite end after you've taken it, it is never as hard as it was as you thought it was going to be. People have the potential to respond really positively, which is usually what happens.
So I just want to wrap up, Sheena, is there a story that has an impact on you as a nurse? One that when, somebody asks you an impactful moment, it could be funny, sad, humbling, heartwarming, any of those sorts of things. Kind of, we all have that one story, really. Is there one that you'd want to share with our listeners?
Yeah. So I'd have to say that every patient experience I've had has sort of affirmed my choice to be a nurse. And each challenge I've had in nursing has forced me to reaffirm my commitment to my vocation. Being terminated without cause was probably one of the most humbling experiences I've ever had. It forced me to do both of those things: reaffirm my choice to nurse, reaffirm my commitment to nursing, learn when you're, as Brene Brown says, laying face down in the arena, looking at who is with you, which nurses are with you, which who are your people. That's probably my most humbling experience. And my other most humbling experience was, I don't know if all your listeners will remember payphones. Is when I was working in Masset, and so I'd only been a nurse for a few years. It was my first job, and I don't know what I knew what I was thinking. I wanted to be there, and I wanted to work in a rural environment, and I wanted the experience. But one of the outcomes of that was I got to work with the youth in the community really closely. And I was walking down the hallway, and cell phones didn't work out there, and they weren't really in existence. And out there, you didn't really need to know anything but the last 4 digits of somebody's phone number. And so you would just tell your phone number by the last 4 digits, not even have to use the rest of it. And I was right in front of the office, and so I was waiting for, I don't know who it was, one of the teachers, I think, to come out. I was going to go teach a class or engage with one of the classes, and I was waiting there, and I looked at the payphone, and I looked at the list of emergency numbers, and there's 911. There was the list. There was the 4 digits to the emergency department, and the 4 digits to the health center, or to the health center. And then the last 4 digits, one of the students had written in, one of the last things was somebody had written in Sheena, and then the 4 digits of my office.
Aww. And
I felt like that was probably one of my best nursing moments, was that somebody thought, a person, a youth, a patient, felt like the care they had received from me was good enough, respectful enough, loving enough to have written there for somebody else to see. And I've carried that with me for the last 16 years of nursing. Just I continue to want to be that person that people want to be next to support them on their journey, whatever it is.
Ugh, I love that. And I mean, that perfectly sums up everything we've talked about today and is a great way to end. So I just want to thank you so much. You are a wealth of knowledge. You are so inspirational. I'm honored that we are connected, and I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Oh, thank you very much, Amy. It was really wonderful to be here and to be able to talk with you too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you loved the advice shared on this episode, we would be so grateful if you would let us know. Please head over to Apple Podcasts, formerly known as iTunes, and subscribe to our show, and then rate us and leave your review. We would be so grateful if you would take the time to subscribe, rate, and review. While you're on our website, nurseleaders.ca/connect, all of our social media handles are there, and we would love to get to know you on social media as well. Thank you again for listening today, and remember, nurses, we have the power to change the world. Let's start today.